Hi, welcome to Effective Performance Management. I'm Kylie Thomas from Dreamstone HR, and I'll be taking you through some ways to effectively manage performance within your organisation. Today we're going to cover off quite a bit, but mainly what we're going to be talking about is why performance management is important, some tips and tricks for effective performance management, where businesses generally go wrong, and then doing a bit of a discussion around what is misconduct versus poor performance. While they may be managed very similar ways, they are actually different in terms of the conduct of the employee. So moving on to why performance management is important. Now, there are a number of benefits of having an effective performance management process, but the reason that that's important is because it really allows you to align performance against your strategic goals. So what your organization is trying to achieve, this actually allows you to align your employees' performance with that. It does drive employee development, so being able to give people a clear message around what is expected of them, what support they're going to get to be able to achieve that, it does drive their own self-development. It provides a stronger level of engagement with your employees, especially with your overall strategic goals as well. If they know what they are and they know how their contribution will actually impact that, you do see a higher level of engagement from your employees. It also encourages performance conversation, feedback, and recognition. Now, employees that are working in an environment where they're comfortable providing and receiving feedback are generally overall more engaged and also more motivated to align more strategically with your business. And of course, it does improve your bottom line. So whether it be an effective performance management process, whether it be engaged employees, all of these things are proven to show revenue results if they're done well. Of course, the impact could be the reverse if they're not done well. So it's really important to make sure that you're on the right track. Managing employee performance is an ongoing process that involves keeping in touch with the employees on a frequent, ongoing basis to ensure that they're meeting the performance expectations and contributing to the overall company's goals. Unlike a formal performance appraisal, where an employee's work behaviour or conduct is analysed over a set period of time, usually once or twice a year, performance management is more about maintaining regular communication, typically between the employee and their manager. However, sometimes they do use a HR person in that. Through informal meetings along with structured performance appraisals and interim reviews, you're building a really solid foundation for performance management. Having a plan tailored to the individual needs of each employee will also improve the odds of boosting employee productivity, morale, and employee retention. Having a plan that is specific for that individual will really change the outcomes. Now, when we talk about goal setting, it's really important that we look at something like a SMART goals philosophy. Goal setting and managing performance isn't necessarily just for big employers. Setting goals and making sure your team knows what's expected of them is proven to be an effective way to improve performance. One of the really key ways to do that is with SMART goals, which are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. If we take a minute and just look at specific, what will be accomplished? What actions will you take? In terms of being measurable, what data will you use to measure the goals? It's really important that your goals are measurable. How much, how often, how well? If we look at achievable, the goals need to be achievable or feasible given the resources available. So wanting something or looking to achieve something that is going to be quite significant from a cost perspective obviously isn't feasible given the resources available. Now, relevance is a really good one as well. How does the goal align with the broader strategic direction of the organisation? Why is the result that you're looking for from the employee important to your business? And lastly, time-bound. Goals need a target date for completion. Now, they can be 12-month targets or they can be 3-month targets, but it's really important that they're measurable. That's how you're going to get the best out of your goal setting. If we look at the benefits of an effective process, there are quite a few, but just to pull out some of the real key ones here. Managers have a professional framework in which to discuss both positive and negative aspects of an employee's performance. That's really key. For a leader to be able to effectively have a challenging conversation, they need a framework to feel safe with. And by having a really good, solid performance management process, you give them that. You'll also have the opportunity to understand your employees' strengths and weaknesses, which is really important when you're building capability for the future. Knowing where their strengths are so that you can challenge them in those areas and really get them to drive that area of performance, and understanding their weaknesses so you can support growth and development. Regular communication sessions also do provide the opportunity for objective discussion around the role and the opportunities for change and improvement. Staff who are not performing well will have problem areas clearly identified and given the opportunity to improve. So again, this provides the employee a bit of a framework so that they understand what the concerns are and how they need to improve. It is proven that employees are motivated to improve their performance if they've got a structured process to do so. You will also see more engaged employees by having performance management in place, by being able to set goals, by being measurable, and then by being held accountable for those. You do build engagement across your teams. And of course, it's really important that employees understand their job responsibilities. That might seem really simple, but you'd be surprised how many employees don't necessarily understand the job responsibilities on a day-to-day level. Looking at some tips for effective performance management. Develop a clear process and make sure you follow it. To ensure fairness for all of your team, it's important to have a clear performance management process in place. The process should map out both formal and informal stages and should include appropriate escalation where an employee's performance does not necessarily improve. Now, that might be a warning system, it might be referral to a HR person. Whatever that needs to be, it should really be mapped out for the employees so they know up front. Once you've got a process in place, make sure you follow it and apply a consistent approach to all of your employees. Document the process, it's really important. Rigorous record keeping is an important part of the process to ensure procedural fairness across the board, but it also reduces your risk of a claim should the process be scrutinised through a dismissal process or an unfair dismissal process. Keep detailed records of any meetings, communications regarding the performance, as well as what outcomes have been agreed to and how often you'll be reviewing those. Make the expectations clear. Give the employee every opportunity to improve their performance by making sure they understand the expectations of the role. Remember to cover off all aspects of the position. If the employee is succeeding in particular areas, it's really important that you acknowledge this and then focus on providing measurable goals for areas where the employee is not at the required standard. Develop a performance improvement plan that all parties agree is realistic and is achievable. Again, going back to those SMART goals, really keep that in mind. It's really important to also take the time to listen to the employee. There are plenty of reasons why employees may not be performing to the required standard, and not all of them will be work-related. Take the time out to sit down and find out if there is something affecting their ability to do their job. Any external factors really do need to be taken into consideration when you're developing a performance improvement plan. It doesn't mean that you avoid having those conversations if the employee is going through something personal. It just means that you need to take it into consideration when you're setting those goals and expectations for moving forward. Again, allow some time for the employee to improve their performance. The goal of performance management is not discipline. It's about helping the employees to perform at a required standard. In some instances, you might be trying to break a career worth of bad habits, and this is going to take a little time. Set some clear milestones for the employee to work towards and give them time to meet them. Schedule regular reviews to check that they're on track. And lastly, it's really important to provide some coaching and support along the way. A key part of performance management is not just outlining the required standard, but also helping the employee to develop the skills to get to that standard. Monitor the situation closely and provide feedback to keep the employee on the right track. Be firm and fair in your approach and track the progress against the performance improvement plan. Managing underperformance is just as important as managing performance overall. A clear system for managing underperformance is both good for business and also for the employees. Best practice employers are aware that ineffective performance management can dramatically reduce the level of performance in the workplace. Employees that perform well can lose motivation if they carry out the burden of the poor performing colleagues. Also, most employees who are not performing well would like to improve. Negative attitudes to performance management or a lack of credibility with the process can be an indication of an inadequate performance management system. A consistent approach to performance management provides the opportunities to address problems and generate effective solutions. A successful performance management process is one that supports the workplace culture and is accepted and valued by employees. So if we just look at a few steps here, step 1 is to identify the problem. It is important to understand the key drivers of performance or underperformance within the workplace, and it's also important to correctly and specifically identify that problem. Step 2 is to assess and analyse the problem. You should determine how serious this problem is, how long it's existed, how wide the gap is between what is expected and what needs to be delivered. Once the problem has been identified and assessed, you're able to then sit down with the employee and discuss the problem. You should let the employee know the purpose of the meeting in advance so they're adequately prepared. The employee should be allowed to bring a support person of their choice to the meeting. Now, that support person is not somebody that participates in the meeting. They're there to provide support to the employee during a difficult time. Step 3, meet with the employee to discuss this problem. It is important that the meeting takes place in a private and an environment that is comfortable and non-threatening, away from distractions and interruptions. You should begin by holding a discussion with the employee to explain the problem in specific terms. From this conversation, the employee should be able to clearly understand the areas for improvement and the impacts on the workplace. You should discuss the outcome that you wish for them to achieve from this meeting. The meeting should be an open discussion, and the employee should have the opportunity to have their point of view heard and duly considered. It's great if you can listen to the explanations as to why the problem has occurred and really take on board the comments that the employee makes. When having this type of meeting, it may be useful in facilitating the discussion to refer to previous positive things that the employee may have done to show that you also recognise and appreciate their strengths. And step 4, jointly devise a solution. Now, it's really important that where possible, you do this together and devise a joint plan. An employee who has contributed to the solution is more likely to accept and act on it. A clear plan of action should be developed with the employee to implement the solution. This can be in the form of a performance agreement or an action plan. Again, needs to be date driven, so it's really important that you set a date for another meeting and how often you will review their progress. And it's really important, I think I've mentioned it before, it's really, really important to keep a written record of all discussions relating to underperformance. Taking a look now at where businesses are going wrong with regards to performance management and managing underperformance. In some instances, employers and businesses can be afraid to speak the truth. However, it's just really important to remember a few key things. Make sure that your feedback is constructive. Discuss the small issues and be honest. Employees do want to do better, so never be afraid to have that conversation. Difficult conversations are never easy, but making sure that you have them up front and honestly will really make a difference. Another area where things don't necessarily go well is where the feedback is too vague. It's really important that you have specific examples of success or areas for improvement. Make sure you prepare for the session and understand what you are being measured on. So making sure that you are providing some really clear, smart goals for the employee. Another area is that there is no follow-up plan or there's no actions. So this is a really big pitfall for businesses when they're going through this process. So it's really important to make sure that you've got accountability, monthly or quarterly milestones, and use an appraisal as a reference. So make sure that you are really jotting some things down, you're getting some measurable accountabilities, you're meeting on a regular basis, you've got a plan and you've got actions. And a lack of preparation is one of the biggest areas where performance management can fall down. Allow yourself a good amount of time to review the employee's performance, the data, your notes, to really understand the key issues. Prepare some dot points or a script prior to the meeting, just so you don't get sidetracked. Employees are going to have questions. They're going to want to potentially take you off track because they want to debate a particular area. So it's really important that you've got these dot points or a script to make sure that you stay on track. There also can sometimes be too much of a focus on forms. And while it's great to have some forms in place, They are just a tool for extracting information. They're not necessarily the be all and end all. Don't focus too much on the process. Focus on the conversation and consider the real value that the process can add. Now, manage and misfires, it might seem like an obvious one, but sometimes people get really caught up in the conversation and they forget themselves sometimes. Not everybody is built to be a leader, and that's okay. It's good to recognize that and work out who can be the best person to manage the employees. If a manager is not engaged in the process themselves, they're not going to get the best out of their employees. And then managers favouring certain employees is a really big area of concern. So you might have 3 people underperforming in your team. You really need to make sure that you manage them all the same. Consistently is really important. Moving on now to misconduct versus poor performance. Misconduct is when an employee partakes in behaviour that is out of line with company policy, goes against the terms of an employment agreement, or it's unlawful behaviour. There are 2 types generally of misconduct, so general misconduct or gross misconduct, which is also referred to as serious misconduct. The distinction between the 2 is important as it will impact the type of disciplinary procedure that you go through. Misconduct is serious behaviour, and depending on the circumstances, as we mentioned, it could be serious misconduct or gross misconduct. For example, some of the areas that would be considered misconduct are misuse of computers or equipment, constant lateness to the workplace, poor presentation, unexplained absences on a regular basis, inappropriate behaviour, abusive behaviour, breaching confidentiality policies, drinking or drug use at or before work, corruption, and obviously theft. Now they go from one extreme to the other, and that's why misconduct is quite varied. In terms of underperformance, though, if we look at that, underperformance is often where employees are unaware that their performance isn't at the level that it needs to be. Underperformance can show up as ways of failure to do the duties of the role, non-compliance with workplace policies or rules, unacceptable behaviour, and disruption or negative behaviour that affects the co-workers. If you don't address underperformance early, it can become a really serious issue, and it doesn't just affect the employee in the business, it affects everybody around them. Now, it is important to understand the difference between misconduct and poor performance. Confusing the 2 could mean that your approach is completely wrong. The main difference is the level of control. Poor performance is when an employee tries as hard as possible but keeps falling short because they lack the skill, ability, or training, as an example. In cases of misconduct, however, the employee could perform better for whatever reason chooses not to. So again, there's that really clear distinction. Thank you for your time today. It's been great to have a chat to you about effective performance management. Please, by all means, get in touch with Dreamstone HR. We'd love to provide you with our templates around effective performance management. Please reach out, and we look forward to seeing you next time.